A tenant completely trashed her landlord's house after not paying rent, and with legal fees and other expenses for repairs, the landlord lost more than $40,000. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and it's actually coming out of Canada, right? And it has to do with a landlord in Ontario. And this is one of those nightmare scenarios where the landlord's property is absolutely destroyed. Now, normally I don't talk about Canada, but I think this can easily be used for anyone throughout the entire United States. This is one of those cautionary tales about how strong tenant protections and anti-landlord laws can really destroy small mom and pop landlords, okay? And you're seeing this up in Canada. I've heard these nightmare stories before. I've talked about them in other videos, and it's scary. It's absolutely scary. It's even worse than what the things we're seeing on the East and West Coast, okay? So in this scenario right here, we have a tenant who didn't pay rent for a very long period of time. And not only that, trashed the place, absolutely destroyed it. Yet it took the landlord tenant board up there in Ontario years to be able to get rid of this tenant. Okay? And this tenant was living in a basement apartment below where the landlord lived. So imagine you're sharing a duplex with a tenant who is not paying you rent and who is trashing your place. Give me a break, okay? This is nightmare. So you know what this landlord decided what they're going to do? They are not going to be renting this unit out anymore. And this is exactly what I've been talking about, okay? This is what happens when you put too many laws, too many rules, too many regulations, make it too hard to evict tenants, regulate how much we can charge for rent. Landlords are just saying, hey, I don't even want to deal with this. I'm giving up on the business because you cannot win. Okay? They created a situation where you are supposed to be the social service provider. You are supposed to be the homeless shelter for these tenants. And you know what? Small mom and pop landlord, they cannot afford this. They cannot afford to take a $40,000 hit at one time and walk away from it unscathed, okay? So that is why they're getting out of the business. That's why they have a housing shortage. That's part of the reason. They've got a lot of dumb laws up in Canada that I do not agree with, and they create their own situation. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So if you, as a landlord, got $40,000 worth of damages to one property, okay? And I'm talking about damages being lost rent, being, actual property damage, as well as legal fees. If you received that much expense from one property, would you be able to survive without selling that property? I'm just curious, like me personally, if I took a hit that big, yeah, I've got large emergency reserves. I might be able to survive, but most likely I would sell that property because the loss would be so big, okay? So anyway, let me get into this article and tell you about this ridiculous situation and the crazy things going on up in Canada. This article is coming from barrytoday.com, and it says, "It hurts. Landlord on the hook for $36,000 in repairs and unpaid rent." A Bradford couple also left to cover nearly $3,400 in legal fees following more than 2-year struggle to get tenant evicted. And that's another thing they just don't talk about very much, okay? It costs money to evict a tenant. You got to hire lawyers. You got to pay expenses. It's not free, okay? So these people who think that willy-nilly landlords are filing evictions, they're idiots. They're complete idiots. But anyway, let me get into this article and tell you what it says. It's every landlord's worst nightmare. A tenant who stops paying rent and refuses to leave. That was the reality for Bradford's Michelle Tadeo and her partner Tony Natale for more than 2 years. Worse still, even after they were finally able to get an eviction order from Ontario's Landlord and Tenant Board and have the tenant removed, they discovered their fully finished basement apartment had been badly damaged, leaving them with an estimated $10,000 in repairs on top of the $25,890 in unpaid rent identified by the tribunal, plus about $3,390 in legal fees. "This place, we're not going to rent it anymore because of what happened," she said. Yeah, and I wouldn't either, okay? Simply put, we're talking about a basement apartment here, yet these people somehow racked up 25 grand worth of back rent that they owed. That's because the landlord tenant board or whatever they have that controls if you can evict this tenant or not, they allowed this person to stay up in there rent free for 2 years. 2 years. I mean, really. I mean, we're not talking about any sort of eviction moratorium or any of that stuff. This is just the process is so slow and stacked so much against landlords that they have no chance. Yet this is what they want to pass here in the United States, okay? They want the exact same thing. And we see the same stuff happening in California, New York, and all these other very anti-landlord places, okay? So this is why I talk about this stuff, right? You want to see the worst case scenario? Let's look north up to Canada, and you can see the problems they have in their, I mean, they have a huge housing crisis up there, and it's more than just about landlords and tenants, okay? Part of the problem they have is that they don't have enough housing, okay? Their housing is sky high, super expensive on top of that, and you know what? The average person working an average job can't afford a house. I mean, yeah, the upper middle class can afford homes. Yeah, the people who bought homes, 30 plus years ago have houses, right? But imagine you're just coming up and you're just an average Joe, okay? You're not somebody who makes a ton of money. You're not in the upper middle class or the upper class, and you're trying to buy your first home. And you're looking way, way out on the outskirts of the city, and it's still extremely expensive. It's not like the US where there's a bunch of, smaller cities around where you can find lower housing costs. No, I mean, a lot of these rules that they have implemented that, basically make it much more difficult to build new housing and much more expensive. Well, they are all over the country. So yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard there. Now, that's not to say it's impossible. I believe that, simply put, if you want a house, you can get one. But what I am going to say is that the odds are stacked against you. And if we pass similar laws here in the US, we're going to have a similar experience. Instead, what my belief is that we need to allow the market to dictate how much rents are. We need to allow landlords to operate their business as they see fit and not a bunch of tenant rights advocates. And we need to minimize the number of laws, rules, and regulations in place, because the more you have, the more expensive housing is going to be. And we've seen it time and time again. Tadeo took Village Media on a tour of the damages, including a broken bathroom faucet, toilet and vanity, broken kitchen blinds, faucet, cupboards, floor, ceiling tiles, and damaged refrigerator, plus multiple holes in the bedroom door, as well as various walls. On top of that, Tadeo said it took her almost 2 weeks to clean an unidentified mess that had been baked onto the inside of the oven. He broke everything, she said. And I'll throw some of these pictures up on the screen. You can see a door that is really torn up so bad that, you could see her face through the door, kind of like in the movie The Shining, which is ridiculous. But, I've seen these sort of pictures before. I've talked about my evictions that I've gone through, some of my bad tenants who've torn my properties up, and the thousands of dollars worth of repairs I've had to do. And keep in mind, this isn't a place where I was able to get that tenant out in a quick manner. Okay, now just imagine that you have these $10,000 worth of damages, but you've only lost a couple of months' rent. That's not as bad as what we're talking about here in Canada in this article, where these people have lost 2 years worth of rent. Okay, and small mom and pop landlords losing 40 grand. That's enough to destroy you financially. So, I hate to say this, but, I would understand if these people got out of the landlord business permanently. And I don't blame them one bit. But what do you think? Do you think they should get out of the landlord business? Do you think this is just a one-off problem? Do you think that Canada actually is a great place to be a landlord? Put a comment in the comment section down below.